Welcome back. You're watching Morning Live. Thank you for choosing to stay with us. Now, the historical scars of the infamous Boipatong Massacre, a tragic incident that happened on the 17th of June 1992, is still an open wound for many. A recent article by Qondile Khedama, who's the head of communications at the Mangaung Metropolitan Municipality, reflects back on this day that was commemorated nearly a month ago. He joins us now in the studio. Mr. Khedama, thank you very much for joining me.
Morning, sir.
For a lot of people that are not familiar with the Boipatong Massacre, just quickly, just take us back into history.
Look, it was in 1992, June, when about 46 people were killed, and amongst them it was kids, it was women. When it is the TRC report did reflect that it was predominantly members of the IFP that engaged into that fatal activity, and it was a build-up during that time to what was happening in the country, particularly in the Vaal Triangle. Remember, because we grew up around the Vaal Triangle, some parts of Tumaole Parys, Sebokeng, Sharpeville, Sasolburg. Now, you had a myriad of activities, political activities that were taking place, and you'd remember, I think in Tumaole around June, during that time, you had atrocities that were conducted by the force during that time, where people like your Milongalo was killed. You also have a series of such activities that happened in Sebokeng in particular. And then that was a build-up, if you can look at it, because the Boipatong Massacre was a culmination of all those activities.
Why did you feel compelled to write about it a month after the commemoration? Why did you think it was so important to still reflect on it?
Look, I think we're a bit, as the country, not necessarily defocused, but the focus is more on current affairs than looking at what happened. Because if you look at some of the things that are happening now or today, they don't give expression into our history. For example, you can talk about the manner in which democracy was attained in South Africa and what is currently happening. I don't think most of us are actually appreciating what happened during that time, because remember, it was even the time of CODESA. And as a result of that activity, CODESA had to stop abruptly, because it was led by Madiba, and Madiba said there is no way in which these talks can happen when people are being killed out there. And the incident happened at the time when I was, as I reflected on the article, that I had cousins around there and so on. One of them actually told me that at the time when these Inkatha people got into the house, he was sleeping. And when he wake up on the corpses lying around there. So it then tells you that really we have to appreciate what has happened. And most of all, Sam, it's looking back and think about those families as to what happened to those families and where they are today.
One of the things that you wrote in your article, you said most of the time these incidences amass iconic status that draw focus away from their own forensic truths. What did you mean by that?
What I meant is that we don't necessarily deal with details. Sometimes we're just saying Soweto, 1976. You're saying Boipatong, 1992. But there are some details that are lying there, because, of course, there are other people who are contesting what has actually happened there. Others were actually saying it's not necessarily members of the IFP. It is only after the TRC has actually said and say, no, but predominantly it was men who were predominantly speaking Zulu. It was men who were staying KwaMadala hostel, and the Boipatong that was adjacent was predominantly or a stronghold of the African National Congress. Now, it is those details that we need to sit down and talk about, because if we are not going to do that and reflect as to what happened, I'm afraid that we are not going to be appreciative of the current situation that we find ourselves in. Today we have a freedom of speech. Today we have a freedom of doing anything as we do. You can, at that time you wouldn't be able to do that. So I for me, it is critical that really we look at these things and give them today's context.
one of the other things is, and you would have been privy to this, is we've really in this country at the moment, currently still in the public space, talk about how we need to remember our history, how the youth of today, the born frees, need to interact with that history, and where that history fits into a country that's moving forward. How do you think, last year in 2014, government handed over the memorial of the Boipatong Massacre to the community in that part of the country and to the families? How should we interpret our past, and how should we reflect upon it?
For me, what is critical, Sam, is that one, I must appreciate the fact that the government in Gauteng, that is led by Premier Makhura, has done something in erecting that memorial. But also, you have certain individuals really who have shown who are philanthropists. Like I think it's Ramela. Who then opened a tavern there. It's called Strikes Tavern. He actually built a factory, and a franchise, a trust, and some of the people who actually suffered during that time are actually benefiting of that. So I'm saying it is not a matter of this is the democracy that is led by the people, and it is people who actually inspire government to do certain things. I'm happy that even after that, the same guy did something. The Sidibeng municipality then contributed in the upliftment of the situation or the conditions of the people in Boipatong.
Mr. Khedama, we've run out of time, but good conversation. Thank you very much for joining us. That's Qondile Khedama, who is the head of communications, Mangaung Metropolitan Municipality, who's written a piece about the 17 June 1992 Boipatong Massacre and sharing his insight on that. Okay, it's time.